What just happened? Good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So I want to just take a minute to congratulate all of you for making it. Like, we are almost to the other side. We are so close, and you are so great. So how many of you can raise your hand on our little Zoom thing. How many of you were able to get people PPE, get some kind of mask for people, get protection? How many people were able to do that? Bravo. Yes. How many people were able to make sure that somebody got paid? Yes. How many people were able to keep communication and support someone with a disability? Yes. Way to go. Way to go. How many of you supported someone supporting someone with a disability? Oh, yeah. How many of you didn't quit? All right, that's everybody, because you're still here. Yay! So congratulations. What just happened? Somehow you are amazing because you made it through. You got there. And as we process this, as we move forward, I just want you to know that you are incredible, because you did so much. Even the little things that you think were nothing, if I had told you 2 years ago you were going to be doing that, you'd be like, what? You're going to work from home and take care of kids, or you're going to, put everything that used to be verbal and meetings in person, you're going to do it all online. You're going to actually support people while they're not able to go into the community. You're going to support people who are supporting people when they can't do half of what they used to do, but you did it. So congratulations. Next slide. And this took its toll. It took its toll because we lost some folks, and we lost them way too soon. So I have often now, most presentations I do, I take a moment for us to honor the people, because we never want to forget them. And it was a tragedy. We've lost a number of folks with disabilities. We lost some staff. Many of us lost relatives, friends. So let's take a moment and just honor them and their lives. A moment of silence. Thank you. You need to give yourself a minute, because you've been through a lot. Next slide. The challenges we have faced. So we're dealing with loss and death, and then trying to get people supplies, trying to keep the machine going and keeping everybody paid, keeping everybody working. It's incredible. We have faced amazing challenges. Next slide. And we faced exclusion and loneliness, which was really tough. So neuropsychological research shows us that our brain is wired for two things that will light up the entire brain, where every part of the brain will start firing. The first is when you have to meet a physical need, right? If you're hungry or if you're exhausted, everything stops and your whole brain focuses on meeting that need. But the second is seeking social interaction. So think about it. Think about what we just went through and how much our brain was seeking that interaction and not getting it, and how much the people we supported were trying to get connected and couldn't. So just this morning, I was doing a training with a group of people, and this one woman said, I was working with someone who couldn't see his girlfriend, and they still won't let him see his girlfriend, and he's melting down every day because he doesn't do Zoom, right? And talking on the phone isn't enough for him. So many people that you've supported went through so much, but then we went through so much. This isolation has been so much. So finally we're emerging, but it's still tough. It's still tough. And that's the research of Lieberman. Eisenberger shows that being excluded in any way causes actual physical pain. Being excluded from all kinds of things, as we were all excluded. So we experienced a community trauma, right? This wasn't an individual trauma, although individually many people were traumatized. This has been a community shared trauma, and it hasn't been easy. And none of us have been at our best, right? it has been a challenge at every turn. So we've had neuropsychological challenges because our brain couldn't function the way it's used to. And then on top of it, next slide, we witnessed horrific murders. And of course, these things have been going on, but we were all home and we were all watching. And there was a terrifying moment when we thought there wouldn't be justice. And then there's the moment when we think there's not enough justice. And there's the frustration. And there's the agony. And the shared trauma. And the witnessing of the horrific trauma of family members who lost their loved one too soon to murder based on race. And we experienced that as a community as well. But next slide, here we go. James Baldwin says, or said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." So the beautiful thing was that we had to face it, and it had to be faced by everybody, not just a select few who already knew, not just those who are fighting on the front lines, but everybody. And everybody had to face it, regardless of their response. That facing did change things to a certain extent, more than we anticipated. And that was a good thing. And so now we're fighting a much more above the board battle, right? So we fought the battle of COVID. We're fighting the battle of racism, unjust murders. And then we're trying to pull ourselves out of this. And the challenges are very real and take their toll. So next slide. What have we gone through? And what has this really been? So I believe that there have been 3 phases of the mental health challenge of this pandemic. The first was fear, right? That was the pure, unadulterated trauma, fear, horror of what is going on. Remember seeing those numbers on the television of people dying and going, what is this? Remember, all of a sudden you're not going anywhere and you're told, everything is shut down. And then you need to get food and you're told you have to wash down your groceries. I have a friend still washing her groceries down. She's like, never again will I not wash my groceries. I'm like, Marianne, it's actually probably okay. Oh no, never again. I will always wash my groceries, right? We're so freaking traumatized. But that fear in that first phase impacted us all. Remember we were told, okay, everything will open up in June, but it didn't. Okay, everything will be back by the end of the summer, but it wasn't. Okay, in the fall, we might have a second wave. No, we still had the first wave. We all lived through this together and it was very intense. And don't think it doesn't take its toll, right? So that was phase 1, was the early months of the fear. Then the phase 2, the isolation, right? As the isolation intensified, many folks suffered with depression. I talked to many people really struggling with depression, with discouragement, with what we call in the trauma world, a sense of impending doom, like no matter what, it's going to get worse. Vaccines came out and people said, well, I don't know. And people had lost their hope. They'd lost faith. They were struggling because of that isolation. And it was a long, difficult winter, right? But we got through the winter and many of us got shots and many things opened up. But now we're in a new phase. And I believe it's the phase of anxiety. There's anxiety with the reopening. Many of us are going back to our locations July 1st. That's very soon, isn't it? I'll be back at my clinic, right? Many of us are going to situations which we don't feel entirely safe in. Others of us aren't really sure. Others of us are rethinking things. And yet others of us are ready to go. Like, I've been ready to go. Let's go. But so much has changed. So my office manager, I was talking to him yesterday and he's like, I used to feel really good about our daycare. Then I brought my daughter home, and we were home for over a year, and now we couldn't get back into that daycare. So now I'm at home with somebody that often just says she's not working that day, and we have to change our lives, and everything's upside down because it's not the place I used to have, and because we lost things and we don't have things the way they were. And then my daughter's not used to leaving us now, and so many things, right? And that's so many of us. Sources of anxiety. Many of us who like to burrow in don't want to come out, right? And we're going through all kinds of phases. So this is, I think it's important for us to understand the mental health challenges that we've been through. The fact that we have had trauma. We had intense fear for a while. We lost people. We had a grief. We were isolated. We felt alone. We felt disconnected, many of us. Some of us felt too connected because we would like to get away with some of the people we're living with. Actually, I know several people who got divorced, right? Wanted to be more isolated, but it was a difficult time. And then finally, the stress, the anxiety, the uncertainty. So I think it's important that you acknowledge, that we all acknowledge, right, what we're going through, that it's not easy, that it's unprecedented, never before in 100 years. It's been 100 years since there was a pandemic, and no one from the people we know, from our parents to our grandparents, went through anything like this. So we're really pioneers of a really crazy time. So giving ourselves a break is a really important thing. Being able to talk to each other, being able to support each other. And these are our new challenges to help with that anxiety, to help bring us all out of the isolation, and to give each other the support that's really needed. So I'm going to turn it over to Tanya about those challenges.
Thanks, Karen. And, I was just thinking as Karen was sharing, what my experience has been. I certainly have, I'm very, very extroverted. I'm almost inside out, but I've enjoyed so much being home with my husband during this time. And I think if anything, we're kind of newlyweds. We've only been married for about, this will be our 4th year. But, it really cemented for me that I am with someone who I enjoy being with and enjoy talking to. But what I also recognize, even though I am extroverted, is that when you are very extroverted, you can stay on the surface of things pretty easily. But we are not in a world anymore that it has surface issues. We're in a world that has some really deep issues, some of the ones that Karen mentioned. And we find ourselves now engaged in conversations that are much deeper with people all around us. And I'm going to spend a little time just talking with you about difficult conversations and what do we do when we find ourselves in the midst of them, and what skills do we already have? Because I know that I often find myself, even though I don't think of myself as an avoidant person, I find myself sometimes avoiding conversations that I suspect are going to be difficult because I feel my emotions coming up. And I don't know if you've ever found yourself in that situation, but maybe use the chat. Here's a good place for us to just kind of check in with each other in the chat. Have you found yourself in the middle of a difficult conversation, or maybe avoiding a difficult conversation and those emotions that start coming up? Add to the chat some of the thoughts that pop into your head when you suspect that there's something difficult ahead, or when you find yourself in the middle of that hard conversation. So let's see some of the things that you find yourself thinking when you know something hard is coming up. So Michael says, yep. And I know Michael. Hi, it's good that you're here, Michael. I wish we were in person, Andy says. Yeah, I wish we were in person. Sometimes it feels like it would be easier to have a conversation one-to-one. I won't be able to say something, or I'll get anxious and start to stutter, which I used to do when I was in childhood. Absolutely. It brings up for us some stuff from the past, right? So keep adding those things to chat. And I'm going to just kind of go through with you a little bit about some of the stuff that pops into my own head and other things that people have told me. Sometimes I find myself thinking, I should say something about this, but I'm afraid it's going to make it worse. There's nothing I can say that's going to make this better. Or every time I try to talk to her about this, she gets so defensive. In fact, just yesterday, I found myself in a conversation where I was saying that to someone, and I realized I was probably avoiding something I really needed to say. Or, you didn't care about this. Why bother? What is the point of this? They just don't listen. and he's happy with things the way they are. Why would we even try to make a change if this is working? So let me take a peek in chat and see what you're thinking. So Michelle gets anxious and starts to talk loudly. And Michael says, it'll make things worse, or the silent treatment ensues, right? We all do this. And I think the truth is all of us find ourselves from time to time, particularly with certain conversations, thinking this is going to be difficult or this is going to be challenging, and I'd rather not be engaged in this conversation. So we've all been in our isolated bubble, and for the negative that comes along with that, there also comes a few advantages of not having to connect with people around things that are really deep or difficult. And what I'm hoping to do just through this conversation is share a few skills that you already have. These are your person-centered skills that you all are engaging and using all the time, so that you can think about difficult conversations, challenging conversations, maybe just a little bit differently, and really transform them into opportunities to learn from other people, or even maybe a way to build your relationship and reduce some of the conflict that you might be experiencing. So our person-centered skills, when we use them consistently, they can change how we even think about difficult people. So you might be really dreading going back to work, and I'm totally putting things in your head here, but I bet somebody out there has this thought. You might be dreading going back to work because now you got to be back with that person that you've been able to escape for a while now, right? So sometimes when we think how differently about difficult conversations, difficult people might become people who are a challenge to work with, or we might even consider, thinking about some of the things Karen told us, that a person who's being difficult might find themselves in the midst of a difficult situation. And so what they're doing is responding to what they're experiencing. So person-centered conversations, they can be really tricky, or person-centered conversations can be really useful in tricky situations or in tricky relationship situations. And it can be true in both personal context and in work context. So if you're supporting someone, you find yourself in these difficult conversations, but you may also find yourself with a colleague at lunch, kind of approaching something that you start to have those feelings bubble up. Like, I don't know if we should go there. So I'm just taking a peek in chat, see what's coming through. There are different comfort levels supporting people where they are. Absolutely, absolutely. And again, these aren't magic skills either. They're really just kind of some tips for helping you gear up and have the best chances of success as you re-enter. So what I've done is gathered some techniques here just to help you practice and really improve your ability to engage through conversations that sometimes you might find yourself avoiding. And usually because of the reasons that you listed in the chat or the reasons that are on the slide here. I'm also gonna encourage you that as you talk with one another and as you talk with me and Karen this afternoon, that you think about some of those potential conflictual situations. See if you can think about them in a new light so that your own life, your own work life, your personal life can be improved by developing and strengthening your listening skills and your communication skills. So what I'm offering you are tips, and we're actually going to ask you in just a bit to talk with one another about it, because you can always get lots of advice about how to approach this. But I really want you to have an opportunity to settle in with one another in this conversation, because you, as Karen is saying, are doing something that no one's done before. We haven't emerged from a pandemic and all of us gone back to work together ever in the history of our world, of our country. So we don't exactly know how to do this. Michael's also saying he is talking about his personal life, his friends, and his family, and he wasn't being passive aggressive about colleagues. Michael, thank you for clarifying that, because you are with people here on this call who you are maybe likely to know, or you at least know tangentially. No, this isn't about one another. This truly is about just good conversations with one another when we feel like things could be tricky or difficult or challenging. Crystal's not offended, Michael. All right. So just thinking about that a little bit together, You already have these skills for engaging and challenging conversation because you have been using your person-centered skills. You're familiar with how to use the skills that help in learning what's working for someone and what's not working for someone, or where things could be better. And you also know a lot about negotiation, you know a lot about listening, and you know a lot about listening for meaning underneath what's being said. So you know about watching what's going on with someone to see if what they're saying and what they're doing is congruent. That gives us a lot of clues about what's going on. Guys, I keep checking the chat because I'm seeing some great stuff come through and I don't want to miss it. Oh, excellent. I'm glad you're here, Michael. So you have these skills, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to employ them. So one of the first one is just simply thinking about what you want to talk about in advance. Now, sometimes we do find ourselves in the midst of a conversation and it kind of comes at us out of the blue, but often we know where some of the landmines are. In fact, that's how we find ourselves avoiding some of the difficult conversations, because we know what's going to come up. So one-on-one meetings, as someone said earlier, I wish I were here in person. I wish we could have, Andrea said if we could have this conversation in person, that would be great. One-on-one meetings are a good moment to carry out tricky conversations, but whether they're in person, whether they're by Zoom, whether they're on the phone, it's important for us to be prepared for the conversations that come up and anticipate those parts that might be difficult. And think about, is it difficult because it's difficult for me? Is it difficult because we're sharing a difficulty here? Or is it something that I know is particularly a hot button for the person that I'm talking with? But we have to remember that communication is a two-way street. And it's often helpful if we can give the other person advance notice of what it is we're going to discuss. So if we know that conversation is coming up, how can we help the person prepare to really engage in that conversation with us in a way that is fair and even, and really establishes the clear expectations for both you and for the person that you're going to be talking to. So you might add talking points to your agenda, or if you're going to be in a meeting with others, make sure that everybody's clear about what we're coming to discuss in the first place, so that people have a heads up. And it's also a nice way for us to be not only clear, but neutral, because once we've entered the conversation that's difficult, we already are kind of in a not so neutral place, right? We already have a position, or we're already feeling the emotions, and it gets hard to take the temperature gauge down on those charged conversations. So knowing what you want to talk about in advance is the first tip. The second one is thinking about being present and what it truly means to be present with another person. So much of what we deduce from talking with someone else, having a conversation with someone else, comes from things like their facial expressions. Our facial expressions also betray how we are feeling about things. So if someone's smiling at you, that smile activates your own smile. It activates the muscles in your face, and it differentiates them from a frown. So if the other person is frowning, you find yourself automatically kind of mirroring that, even without really thinking about it. We internally register what the other person is feeling, what they're experiencing in our own body. So we start to take that on. And smiling is so important in social interactions that we can even discern if someone smiles at us if they're talking to us on the phone. We can't even see their face, but we can hear the smile in their voice. So your smile is something to think about, even if you're having a conversation over the phone, and you want to make sure that you're trying to project goodwill and warmth. And one of the things that you can do to do that is just to smile, so that it gets reflected in what you're saying. We've also always heard that our eyes are the windows to our soul, and you can predictably determine someone's emotion from their gaze. So eye contact is one of those really critical first steps for resonance. And that's a person's ability to read someone else's emotions. So if I want to be able to accurately understand your emotions, it's very helpful if I can actually see you, especially your eyes. It's also important for creating a feeling of connection. So if we can make and maintain eye contact when we're giving someone feedback, for example, if we are maybe supervising someone, that is really helpful in helping them take that information in a way that is non-threatening. And we want to make it an easy eye contact, not glaring. We don't want to stare them down, but we also want to make it a consistent eye contact. From the time we are little bitty babies, we are very acutely aware of the voices of the people that we consider important. And the way we feel about another person shifts the way we speak to them. So the tone of our voice, more than just the words that we say, can give away how we feel. And I know probably every single one of you at some point in your teenagehood had your mother or some caregiver say to you, an adult caregiver say to you, it's not what you said, it's how you said it. And it probably had something to do with you being sassy. I know I got that one sometimes myself. But it can give away how we feel. And in fact, there's a lot of research that says we can predict someone's emotions just based on their voice. I often think about, because my early career was with older adults, I think about how people talk to older adults as if they're bitty babies. So they infantilize by raising their voice and patting them and saying, sweetie, and all of those things that you would do with a newborn baby. And it's one of those things that people immediately seem to intuitively do when they're with older adults. And for a lot of the older adults I've worked with, it's been incredibly offensive to them. And that's one of the things that and it's cultural too. So in different cultures, it happens. In some cultures, it doesn't. I'm taking a peek in chat to see what's going on up there, just make sure everybody's okay. Andy says, does the feedback end after your teenage years? Depends on whether or not the behavior ends, Andy. So the way we sit even. So if we're sitting slumped or we're sitting tall, if our arms are crossed across our chest, that all transmits a message to others. I was even told when I was a new social worker, they used to videotape us all the time when we were doing practice therapy sessions or practice conversations, because the way we held our bodies communicated so much. And so we would watch these videos almost to the point I was afraid to make any movement whatsoever. But even I'm a big self-hugger, and it's because I tend to be a little bit cold all the time. So I sort of curl in on myself, but that puts a barrier between me and the person I'm talking about, or it can look like I'm disinterested or even angry. So all of those messages we send with our body are very important, and the other person is subtly scanning that the entire time. So we walk into a room and we find someone sitting with their arms crossed, we feel already less connected to them. Having your chest kind of open, your arm uncrossed, making sure you keep nodding and smiling and vocalizing, saying things like, and yes, because we're encouraging the person to talk to us, is going to help immensely if you're trying to have a conversation with someone. And you also want to make sure you're in a non-dominant stance. Your role is often already powerful, particularly if you're a supervisor or if you're a person who's in a support role. You have an assumed role of power already. So the best way for the other person to hear you is if you can take a stance that's non-domineering. So if I can sit beside Karen, I put myself on equal position with her, and we can look at the same thing at the same time. That has a very different feel as if I stand over her and, point to something on my page. So I think as I'm giving you these examples, see if that resonates for you a little bit. The emotions we feel can also change the way we breathe. And I know in some of our other sessions with you, we've done a lot of work on breathing. I'm not going to do that today. But you've probably noticed that when you're stressed or when you're angry, you start to breathe really quickly and even kind of shallowly. It's almost like a panting breath. And when you're tired or you're exasperated, kind of at the end of your rope, you tend to sigh a lot more. Similarly, when we're with someone who sighs a lot, we may feel that they're annoyed at us. That's how we tend to interpret that. So before you go into a conversation, or if you find yourself in the middle of one of these conversations, try to take some deep, calming breaths just to slow down a little bit. And when you exhale, what automatically happens and autonomically happens is that your heart rate begins to drop just a little bit. So focusing on breathing out a little bit more than you breathe in can actually bring your mood into check as well and level you out. And if you do that for a couple of minutes before a meeting, you're going to start to find this place of calm, and it puts you in a much better headspace and a much better physical space. And you just look calmer as you go into that conversation. And that calmness is also going to help others you feel that you're speaking with feel more at ease with you. All right, let me take a peek in chat again. Oh, thank you. So Michael says, can you repeat the breathing out just a bit more than breathing in? Yeah. So when we're upset, or when we feel like we may even get upset, we start to breathe in a way that's pretty quick, and it's like panting almost. So it's shallow and it's fast. So if you find yourself with your breathing changed a little bit, it usually has to do with some kind of excitement. And it can be because you're getting upset. What you want to do is, when you breathe in, make sure that your exhale is a little bit longer than your inhale. And that will help kind of calm you down, make you feel more calm, but the other person responds to it as well. So the more you calm yourself, the more you help them calm. And thank you, Deloise. Another tip for you is just to really think about how you create that environment of honesty. It takes deep trust to do what we're all about to do. Going back into the world, I'm starting to talk with people now. I know Karen flew somewhere a week or two ago. Getting on airplanes does not interest me in the least, although before the pandemic, I was flying 8 times a week all over the place. Right now, it just doesn't, I don't feel like I'm ready yet. And that takes some deep trust with the airlines, who I didn't trust in the first place. It takes trust with the agencies where I'm going, that they've thought this through, and can we do this safely? And when I hear things like Delta variant, I feel all the little prickles go up on top of my head, right? So it's really important for us to foster that sense of trust and also mutual respect, to encourage some of the exploration around these really tough topics. These are not small things we're approaching together, and that can help people feel more comfortable and certainly more candid with you. When we're facing a tough conversation, or we're in the midst of a tough conversation, to open up the conversation and show that you want to hear what the other person has to say, we need to be aware of a lot of these things about our body, but we also need to be aware of the environment that we're creating just through our words and our actions. Are we impeccable with the way we are approaching the other person? And one way to break the ice for having a more difficult conversation is just to tell people directly that you're open to having a difficult conversation. So letting people know that it could be hard to talk about this, but you really want to understand their perspective is a nice way just to kind of, again, lower the emotional temperature. So let me just ask you to respond in chat again. What are some of the things that you're doing, or you find yourself doing, when you're trying to foster a sense of trust with others? Are there any tips that you could share with other people here about how you help convey to the other person that you're someone who can be trusted? What are some of the things you say and do?
Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
Relax breathing and learn what others value. These are great points, Cynthia. Meeting them where they are. Yeah. Knowing what drives a person, like what is really their motivation. That's great. Tell them something personal about me. I do that too. I think that's a wonderful point. Charlisa. Yeah. And Cynthia and Chris have great things. Find commonalities. Yes. Creating an open environment. Crystal, food. Yes, food. Food is amazing, isn't it?
Absolutely. These are all wonderful tips. Keep them coming. Just keep using the chat for your purposes there. We'll make sure we come back and add that in. Being open-minded, absolutely.
I missed two, sorry, Andy, because they were coming so fast. It says it resonates completely. I am not a poker player. I tend to show my feelings on my face. And that can be a good thing when you're opening up, right? And being open-minded, Cynthia said, so many good points.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry.
Even to say, you know, when you're creating trust with someone and you acknowledge that you're open to a hard conversation, it's also okay to say, and this is hard for me. I'm having a hard time finding the words, or I don't know quite how I feel about it. Those are all okay to say, because they really do help level that conversation in such a way that the other person understands that you're also struggling. So you're balancing out the power through using some of those techniques. These are great, guys. Please continue to put those in the chat. In addition to being honest and some of the other tips we've already given you, pay attention. And I think this is one, it's related to being present. But I find myself probably 5 times a day telling myself that I have wandered off mentally. Zoom to Zoom to Zoom to Zoom is how I have been living now for, I don't know even how many months we've been in this pandemic, how many years we've been in this pandemic. It's been a while, right? But about 50% of the time, and this is according to research, our minds just wander. And I think moreover, given that we have really busy schedules and we have messages coming at us, we have emails that are constantly bombarding us, we have things that are popping up on our screens, we're not always present with the people who are in front of us. And I think it's actually more true in the virtual environment. I am very aware when someone has their phone down here because it just changes the posture of their body. I can tell they're not looking at me. I see them look up and have a moment of realization when I say something I think is funny. They may not think it's funny, but I can tell often, right? And so I already, if you're not paying attention, don't really want to engage with you, or I don't work as hard to engage with you. So we're still processing often something that happened earlier. This is not because we're bad people, and I don't want you to hear it that way. This is truly because we are on overload. We are all on overload. And here we are going right back into the same environment in terms of the work world, the same physical environment maybe, with people who have also been through the pandemic and know what that's like, and they've experienced that isolation and that fear, and they're also anxious like we are, and we're all trying to just get back to work, right? Just get back to work. And I don't think it's really going to be that way. And I think when we're not present, when we're not paying attention, people can tell. So when we're not fully present, we are less likely to hear people, and we're much less likely to respond skillfully, let alone understand where they're coming from. It is impossible for me to listen to the message underneath the message if I've got my own thing going on. Again, not because I'm a bad person, but because I am so distracted that I am not fully present with you as another human being. In addition to that, we also want to be authentic and really show some compassion. If you're not authentic, all your efforts are going to backfire. You can have the right body language. You can, be perfect in your eye gaze. You can have a wonderful tone of voice. But if you are just kind of faking your way through it, people can tell that. So just think about how you feel when you're around someone who seems to be something they're not. We often feel like we walk away from that interaction feeling uncomfortable or even maybe manipulated a little bit. And our blood pressure tends to rise a little bit when we experience inauthenticity from others. So rather than seeing a conversation as something that is difficult and something that you just have to survive, you have to get through it, see the conversation as an opportunity to connect with the other person. And remember all those things Karen said to you, like we have our own needs about this. We have our own pain about what has happened and what is happening around us. Everyone at some point, particularly in the last year, but it's been true since all of human race has been in existence. We go through tough times, we go through sad times, we go through painful times. And sometimes what we need to do is remind ourselves of our human experiences that we all share. And right now we have shared the universal experience of a pandemic. And if we can do that, we can find often ourselves being able to bring some kindness and some compassion into a conversation. And a conversation like this is a way to listen to what the person is doing. It's a way for us to listen to behavior. Remember how we say that in person-centered practices? We're listening to what the person's doing. You're able to kind of probe into or look into what's prompted the person to act in a certain way. And that's all related to just being authentically who we are, being authentically curious, and being, I think, respectfully curious about the other person and the experience they're having. And in addition to that, we have to aim for understanding. I can guarantee you, and I just said to you, I really have enjoyed being at home with my husband, but we see very differently on a lot of really big issues. The ultimate goal for us is often about understanding one another. It's not about consensus. And I think if we approach things that are difficult often with the desire to understand where the other person is coming from, rather than to meet each other with full consensus about something, the ultimate goal when we're addressing that difficult situation isn't necessarily about seeing eye to eye, but rather about finding an understanding between us as people. So sometimes when we have conflict with others, particularly if we find ourselves in like some verbal conflict or in a conversation that doesn't feel quite right, it's rooted in misunderstanding. And you want to make sure that you're not missing the vital information. So I love that when I ask you in chat about building trust, many of you pointed to something that I would say, listening to what's important to a person, you want to understand what matters to them, right? You're listening for those things that matter. You're listening to the things that light the person up. You're listening to what's at the core of them as a human. And it also gives us an opportunity to then be empathetic and give the other person a space to share their perspective before we offer our own. So in the moment, it's not always the time to share a rule or an explanation of or feelings. It can truly be about just giving the other person that space and letting them express themselves, not about giving them the information. That is hard to do. I have a friend right now whose mom is really, I think, at the end of her life, which is dementia and a number of other things going on. And I found myself the other day, because she was asking for advice, I found myself relating what she was saying back to a time when I was supporting an older adult in my life who had a completely different issue. And I realized at some point that while I was also giving her advice about what she asked about, I was in my own feelings, just kind of processing and airing my own feelings. And I thought, this is not what she needs. What she needs me to do right now is just let her express what she's going through. So I backed off a lot and just let her say all the things that she needed to say about that, ask questions, and I answered if I could. But I stopped relating it back to my own experience, and it made a huge difference in the conversation. Not that there was anything conflictual going on, but I realized that my presence is different when I approach it with the desire to understand the other person rather than to be understood by them, even though we all have that base need, right? So remember, there's a difference though between acknowledging something and agreeing with someone. You don't have to validate a person's point of view to make them feel heard. But listening is very important, and restating it from the person's perspective is vitally important. It can be really useful for you. So this helps demonstrate that you're open enough that people not only feel comfortable being honest with you and telling you how they actually feel, but they believe that you care personally. And that is key to cultivating that supportive, collaborative, side-by-side approach. You don't have to say, I agree, but you can acknowledge that that's how they feel. And you can restate that in a way that helps them understand that you actually understood their perspective. In addition to that, when we're preparing for tough conversations, you have to dig into just a little bit what you're feeling. And this is work. We don't talk about feelings at work in the US. It's not something we do a lot of. But if we're going to understand and share our own thoughts clearly, we have to kind of know what we're feeling about what we're saying. So try to separate what you know from what you think or feel. And you can do an objectivity exercise here that might eliminate an assumption or a projection. And you might do that simply just by processing the feelings that you're having. So do something like consider the advice you'd give a friend in your position, or even if you were in the other person's position, what advice would you want someone to give you? Sometimes that perspective taking, which we do a lot in person-centered practices, can really help us see it from the other person's perspective, but also connect to the feelings that they may be having. So I like to gather all the facts and then consider the outcome that I would like to get from the conversation, but I also want to understand what the other person hopes to get out of it. Build the conversation backwards is a great way to do it. And then once you know what the desired outcome is going to be, make some notes ahead. So that might be one way you prepare for those difficult conversations. Talking about a difficult conversation, having a difficult conversation can really evoke in us some emotions, even if we are very calm and regulated people. And so when it comes to managing our emotions, it's important to find a good balance between being very composed, but also being very authentic. So you can tell someone you're angry without screaming at them and leaning forward in such a way that makes them actually fear your anger. It's okay to have that emotion, but it's how we balance that as we express it. And the other thing I will tell you, and this is one that I think takes a lot of practice sometimes, particularly if you're in somebody who's in a management role, supervisory role, be calm. Be calm enough, but don't be too calm. So if you are overly calm, it can really give the impression that you don't care. That might look like detachment, or that you think you're better than the person that you're having the conversation with. So you really want to remain calm and express yourself and express the emotions that you're having, and also share that content that's really important for that difficult conversation. But at the same time, you don't want to make it seem like, and I don't care if how you respond to this. So that's an art, and it takes a little bit of practice, and we don't really practice having difficult conversations all that often. So I'll share with you, if you've been in training with me around anything around difficult conversations or empathy, I have always shared this video because I love it. It's short. It's really about being present with others. It's about how to respond when we hear something that's uncomfortable to hear. And it's about the topic of empathy. And I think it's such a nice reminder that I share it every time we talk about this. So if you've seen it, I think you'll still enjoy seeing it again. So I'm going to play this. And Karen, would you give me a thumbs up if you can hear it once I start it?
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, and climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
All right. So just to give you, hang on, let me make sure I'm past that. Just to give you a moment to respond in chat to that. That is from Brene Brown. She has a wonderful podcast. If you know Brene Brown's work, it's Brene. It's like Renee, but with a B. Brene Brown. And you can find lots of her work on YouTube. She does her research on vulnerability, which when she first announced that that's what she was going to do, apparently a lot of people said, are you crazy? This is going to kill your career. Because we don't talk about this in the US. We aren't vulnerable with one another often. And we also don't talk about it particularly in a work context, but we are going into this environment where we really do need the ability to be vulnerable with one another. A lot of people are liking her books. They're saying this is powerful stuff. And I find her stuff to be remarkably clear and honest. and remarkably vulnerable. And I think it's really helpful. So if there are things you can expose yourself to from her work, I think that's a great way to think about what does it mean to be present with someone who's struggling, or presence in the midst of someone else's struggle, which is not always the easiest thing to do because we don't want people to feel bad, particularly in our field, right? We're here to help people. So we want people to feel good. And sometimes all we can do is really just be present as they struggle through what they're struggling through. So I'm going to shift this a little bit before we ask you to talk with one another to think about going back to work. And I had to do a lot of research about that because, again, this hasn't happened in our history, certainly. We haven't emerged from a pandemic on the level that we have just experienced and gone back to work together with differing ideas in the middle of a country that has really struggled in the last year with all kinds of issues that had nothing to do with the pandemic. So I did some research, first of all, starting with the Harvard Business Review, and I've got a few other things to share with you, but there is some fascinating stuff, new stuff coming out right now. And according to the Harvard Business Review, most employers have done a really good job in the way they've responded to the pandemic so far. So Karen was asking you, did you get PPE for people, for yourselves? Did you stay employed? Did you help other people stay employed? And employers have done a really good job overall with how they've approached this. That doesn't mean everybody to, a person or to an organization has, but it does mean that there have been some impressive strides in our country in the way we have banded together around this. And the key to that success, according to this research, has really been around communication. So employees who have received regular updates from their companies are really much more likely to be proud to work for that organization, but also be willing to go back to work and actually be looking forward to it. So they say about 43% of people who got really good communication on a regular basis, who have a lot of transparency in the communication with their organization, they're actually looking forward to getting back into the swing of things. So there were about 350 CEOs that were, and human resources and finance leaders, a number of other folks who were surveyed, and 70% of them said that by fall, they hope to have everybody back in the office. And there are three factors that they identified that are really important to have in place for your return to your workplace. And there are lots of factors actually when you're considering bringing people back to work. And I know a lot of this has probably been swirling in your head, or if you're in a management role, you may have been thinking about this and how to accomplish it. And businesses are exploring a lot of back to work models that maybe don't include coming back into the office as well. So there's some mixture of on premises and at home work. And the success of those efforts are really determined greatly by the actions that the employers take around these three things. So the first one is taking care of the people. So the people who work there, putting the right processes in place to deal with the changing circumstances. And the third one is around creating an environment that allows employees to do their best work. And so while you're addressing all three of those, and organizations are thinking about that, it does nothing really in terms of taking the anxiety out of it for those of you who are returning to the workplace, because the decisions and the resulting plans from all the decisions about returning to work are based on thoughtful planning that can really help diminish everyone's fear factor, but it's not the only ingredient. So some additional tips that we have for you in terms of returning to work before we start talking about your experiences and some of the things that you'd like to kind of make sure that for yourself you're taking care of as you enter work again. There are some tips for reducing some of your return to work anxieties. It doesn't have to just mean a change in your workday. So for many of you, you've been at home, you have had a completely different environment for quite some time now. And the return to household routines, even things like your childcare arrangements or your sleep schedule. I have never slept so good in my life. And that's even during all the anxiety and fear that gets kicked up because of something like a pandemic. I was laughing about Marianne washing her groceries Karen, I sunned my mail. I would put my mail in a basket in the sunshine every day and just leave it for 2 or 3 days and let it age in the sun. Because I thought that's got to help. Sunlight kills everything, right? So for all of us, there are all these things that we've been doing kind of in our own little bubble for a while. And everything for all of us has shifted during the pandemic. So some of the tips that we have for you around just streamlining some of your routines and practicing self-care. I think self-care can be sometimes a cop-out that people will say to you to take care of yourself. But truly, if you are going to survive and thrive and get rid of that anxiety, or at least manage the anxiety, you need ways really to take care of yourself, given all the things that are outside of your control. So one of the things I would say to you is do your best in your home environment to simplify. So you're changing again, you've been at home, you've got all these routines kind of changed up and you're in the groove of that. Now you're going back into an office setting or some type of congregate setting, or maybe it's a completely new thing, but do your best to simplify in your home environment. If your kids were involved in 10 activities prior to the pandemic, they probably are involved in a lot less now because a lot of that went by the wayside. And that means we're going to find ourselves again, ramping up what to do with the kids now that we've gone back to work. If you're the one who does the grocery shopping, sometimes people have said, I've been handling grocery shopping now, but I'm switching to a delivery service. So just things like that, small shifts that may make a difference in some of those routines that you have changed during the pandemic. And don't neglect the basics of self-care. And that means making sure you're getting enough sleep, particularly if you need to wake up earlier now to commute, which many of us haven't done in a long time. Like, I think the airport might flip me out a little bit at this point. I hadn't been there since February or March of 2020 was the last time I was in the airport. And I kind of am digging it, even as much as I love what I do, right? But making sure that we're accommodating those things again that we need to. Exercise, eating well, and just making time for some of the activities that allow you to unwind. For me, that's meditation and art. But for others of you, that may be some type of exercise you enjoy, participating in, or watching movies, or whatever it is you do to just kind of flake out and be comfortable. Some of the feelings of anxiety about the return to work are really expected. And I think even when Karen and I were asked to do this presentation, I was like, I don't know what I can say to people who are returning to work because I haven't yet returned to work. I've done a lot of research about it now, and I feel like I have a good grip on what I'm hearing from my friends who have returned. And some people have actually returned, months and months ago. So they've been in it for a while. But I was like, is that really authentic of me to be talking to people when I haven't returned to work? And Karen and I even had a discussion about that because I think it kind of develops in us this level of distress that really can interfere with our daily functioning, our functioning at work, our ability to concentrate. And if you find yourself really, I don't want to use the word ruminating because that almost makes it sound like a flaw, but really focused, hyper-focused on that anxiety about it, that's a time really to talk to a mental health professional even. So if it's beyond what you feel like are normal anxieties, you may want to get some additional help. And don't forget your personal network. Knowing which of your friends you can turn to for support is a really crucial part of adding people to your toolbox. So we have lots of person-centered skills. We have lots of meditation skills, but we also just have good people in our lives who kind of can help us talk through some of the things we're experiencing. But the office itself actually can be a meaningful source of personal connection during this time. And those personal bonds between colleagues have been shown to make us more productive, and they've also been shown to make us more effective at work. In fact, one of the big survey questions from the, it just went right out of my head, the Gallup polls about workplaces and satisfaction are really about having friends at work that we can talk to or rely on. So feeling like we have someone we're connected to there can make a huge difference in how we're feeling. But the bottom line is we've all changed as a result of the pandemic, and we have to get to know people again after the pandemic, even if we knew them before, and give ourselves that time for those personal bonds between us and our colleagues that may have changed as a result. Give ourselves permission to care about one another. give ourselves permission to give one another space to have conversations about what we've been through and what we're going through collectively. And ultimately, what experts are saying about this return to work is that the transition back to work is just that. It's in a transition period or an adjustment period that's best approached with an open mind, because we don't exactly know how to do this, right? If anybody says they're an expert in this, you should be very suspicious of them. Also, going back to the office, I think represents a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I actually have been doing a lot of thinking about that lately, about how I would recalibrate some of my work choices, and really embracing that adjustment period by trying to prioritize some of the tasks and the activities that were maybe challenging to do remotely. There are things I really appreciate about being in a remote environment that I can still do. And I'm so glad we were able to work and continue our work during the pandemic. And there's some stuff that just stinks in this environment. And I cannot wait to be back in person with people, because I'm going to be even sharper when I'm back. I'm really looking forward to some of those opportunities to recalibrate some things that maybe I had gotten a little sloppy on, or that I feel like I could do much better now because I have had this experience. Face-to-face meetings, catching up with colleagues over lunch, just, having lunch with another person who's in your field is an amazing thing. I never thought about that really before the pandemic. So interactions that are going to help us return to the social rhythm of our office is really what we should be focusing on. So think about things you can streamline. Think about how you might seek and give support. Maybe use some of those tips that we've given you for challenging conversations, certainly your person-centered skills. Mind your mindset. So make sure that if you really are having anxiety in excess of, and it's in excess for you of what you would ordinarily have, that you're getting attention for that from a professional, and build that better work day into your life. Make it what you need it to be as best you can, and support others as you see them doing that as well. So what we're going to do is shift into an opportunity for you to talk with one another. We call this a World Cafe. And if you have not been a part of a World Cafe, this is not a model that Karen and I made up. It's actually a model that has existed for a while, but it's a way to have conversations with others about your own experiences and to build on what one another are saying. Often it's kind of networks of conversations. So you saw just a little tiny bit of the research about returning to work. I don't know if any of that happened through the means of a World Cafe, but what you're doing today, or what you're going to participate in, could actually be part of how people approach returning to work. So it's a way to get you to weigh in on your experiences and your needs, and also your thoughts about this time in your life. But it's a way for us also to focus together on a question. We're going to give you the opportunity to contribute your thinking. And it means you have to be willing to talk with one another in groups in those breakout rooms. So we're about to send you into breakout rooms in just a moment. What I'm hoping for is some shared learning, some shared wisdom, and some opportunities for you to connect with one another. I also really hope that you will take care of yourself in those conversations. I think this is a particularly sensitive topic for all of us, returning to work with our anxieties. Anxiety in and of itself is a hard thing to talk about, and it's hard to be vulnerable with one another. So please do take care of yourselves and one another, make room in those conversations for one another. But I think the feedback we're getting, and Karen and I have been part of doing World Cafes now, through SDA and a number of our partners. Karen is one of the partners as well. Ever since the pandemic began, we've been doing them on a focused topic, and we're finding that people are saying these are uplifting for us. It's a nice time to connect with others. It's useful. I took something away that I can do something with, and I hope that you find the same. So the way it will work is that we'll send you into a breakout room in just a moment. And I'm going to show you the questions, and I'll ask Karen if there's anything she wants to add. Just as a reminder, if the conversation brings up emotional topics, just take care of yourself, and take care of one another if you can. I don't mean for this to be in any way triggering to folks, but it can be, right? We're in a place of kind of unsurety, and you've just come out of a lot of fear and isolation. So we're all kind of prickly. My dad used to use the word fuzzled, which is kind of fuzzy plus ruffled. Fuzzled. We're all a little fuzzled right now. So just make room for that. with one another, please. One speaker at a time. I think that is something that you'll just work out in your breakout sessions. You can unmute your mic, you can use your camera. If you don't have a mic or a camera, use the chat box. Karen and I may pop in and out just to make sure that you're okay and having the conversations you should be having. But take notes, jot down your thoughts and your themes, because when we come back together, we want you to summarize with us some of the things that you talked about together, and do stay on time. And I think we have a nice amount of time for this conversation. 30 minutes is about average. And please do share your wisdom. Karen, is there anything you want to add for this?
No, everything you said was so helpful, Tanya. I'm like, okay, I need to write all this down for when I go back to the office on Thursday. Thank you.
So I'll share with you what you're going to discuss together. And then I'm also going to share, Crystal, I don't know if Crystal, can you hear me out there?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I shared a worksheet, but I'm not sure if people have access to this already. If they don't, it's the one that is the self-care plan. Did they get a copy of that prior, or will they get it after?
Let's see. I'm not sure if that went out, but I can send it right now, or I can put it in the...
I could also put it in chat, or you could put it in chat.
Okay.
I'll just show you all what it is. And you don't have to fill one of these out in your conversation, but it's just something to help with. I think self-care is something we bounce around a lot, but we don't tell people tangibly how to do self-care. And it's different for every person anyway. And there may be parts of you that need a lot more care than other parts. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But what you're going to talk about in your breakout room is it's kind of related to fatigue, but you can also include anything, the things we've talked about. So difficult conversations, the anxiety that you may be feeling. And the reason that we call this fatigue is that there are now, waves and surges of this virus. Again, there's other stuff going on that's kind of, evolved from our experience with the virus. There are continued incidences of discrimination towards people of color. There is worry, there is stress, there is lack of predictability. There are still people who are somewhat isolated. We have differing beliefs, some of us, and you don't have to get into the weeds about this stuff, but beliefs about the vaccine, beliefs about social distancing, beliefs about how we safely engage with one another. And I think we're all at risk right now of being overwhelmed. We're at risk of being frightened still, outraged, and really kind of too tired to do anything other than seeking to get through our day. So if we are going to engage with our colleagues when we go back to work, find ourselves in the midst of conversations that may be challenging sometimes, find ourselves fatigued just from life in general and everything that we have experienced and that is still going on. I just want you to have a conversation about what you can do around self-care, what you have been doing, what some of your challenges have been, but it's also helpful to really share where some of your victories have been, where some of your successes have been, or something that you're really looking forward to as you re-enter. So I'm going to leave this really wide open and let you have a conversation that fits for your needs in that breakout room. I'm also going to share with you a self-care plan. And this is something that I think is helpful. I actually created this for a World Cafe that we did some time ago with SDA, not too many months ago. Because we wanted to give people some practical tips about what does it mean to practice self-care. And there is actually some research, a lot of research actually, about how to do this. And I did include one of the links on this slide here, so I know you'll have this in your materials. But there are domains kind of how we need to take care of ourselves. And one of those is just taking care of our mind. So one of the tips I gave you was mind your mindset. Thinking about how you're thinking is an important part of this, and what can you do to improve your psychological mind frame right now, your mindset at the moment. What are you doing to take care of your body? What about the important relationships in your life, your spirit, your aspirations? And if you think about that, that tracks very nicely to the things that are important to us in person-centered practices. I am assuming that plan has just come through. Yep, Crystal has just put the self-care template the self-care plan template in the chat box. So if you want to grab that and download it for yourself, you can. You don't have to fill it out in the breakout room, but I just want to share it with you because I think it may help stimulate some of your conversation. And so this is mine. It's about how we take care of ourselves, how we support people who are providing support. What have you tried and what's worked for you and what hasn't? So for myself, in terms of the self-care for my mind, I did not know for several days that a building had collapsed in Florida. You know why? Because I've been limiting my exposure to the news. And there's all kinds of opinions people can have about that. I love the news. I can get quite absorbed in it and really get down in the weeds about the news. And the truth is, it does not really make a difference in my life other than to make me sadder and more worried. So it was a couple of days before I knew that Surfside had happened. And the truth is, if I really need to know, someone will tell me is another part of it, right? And then I can go out and seek information on my own. So I'm limiting my news to an hour daily. And some days I really don't check in with it at all. I do read every day, and especially right now, I'm reading fiction. I tend to always read management books and data and research and all kinds of stuff like that. But right now, to soften things up for me a little bit, I need a little bit of fiction. I am practicing gratitude daily. And what that looks like for me is actually intentionally in the morning, thinking about a few things that I'm grateful for, just 2 or 3. That's all. I mean, that is a huge job for me because it is not how I tend to be wired. I realize that I've been kind of stinking at being grateful. So I've been working on gratitude. And I do look for examples of loving kindness around me at all times. So, and what I mean by that are people who are doing extraordinary, loving things in the world. That really helps me look at some of the potential of the human race, because it can be easy to get down on humans sometimes too. For my body, I'm doing yoga. I am doing what is called a Shakti mat, which is a spiky mat that I lay on at night. I do Qigong. I do have a Sunday yoga class online that I go to. For my spirit, Karen has taught me a Buddhist chant that I love, and it really helps me to focus my energies, gives me a time of intention where I can meditate daily and try to bring good things into the world. I do make art as often as I possibly can. I think that's really good for my spirit, particularly. It helps me connect to those things inside that are really important to me. And I take care of my houseplants. I love to, feed them and water them and snip off little brown bits and all that kind of stuff because I feel like I'm nurturing something. In terms of relationships, Karen's one of those important relationships. And I've got a whole bunch of people listed here. And for me, all it means is I just like to check in with people. I send them a little text or something, or Karen and I have a standing weekly conversation where we just enjoy one another, and which I'm loving so much. And then in terms of aspirations, that's a hard one for me. I was like, what are my aspirations? Number 1, survive the pandemic. So far, so good. I'm also being kind to myself and trying to lift other people's spirits as often as I can. I'm learning to sail. That's an aspiration I have. And a place where I was really struggling is being fully present, because there is so much on my mind right now. It has not been easy to always find myself fully present. So I hope that something like this can help you think about, as you think about fatigue, you think about re-entering the workplace, you think about difficult conversations or challenges you may be having ahead. How can this be helpful to you? I'm going to give you that time of 30 minutes just to connect with one another and really make it about what you need it to be about. When you come back, I'd love for you to summarize, and we'll give you a couple of opportunities, a couple of different ways you can summarize with us when you come back. Karen, anything to add before we send them into breakout rooms? Okay, and Charlisa, I changed my mind. Instead of 10 people, could we put about 8 in a breakout room? 7 or 8 would be about right. And we can open those up for 30 minutes.
All right.
And you may see us pop in and out. Don't worry about that. When the breakout rooms are open, you're going to see a blue button that says join. So just click that and you'll arrive magically, just like Harry Potter magic, where you're supposed to be. And so as soon as she has those open, you should see a blue button that says join.
I think everyone should be able to join the room now.
All right. So Charlisa has those open and you all can join your breakout rooms, and we'll keep an eye out in the main room in case anybody's having difficulty joining. All right, folks, if you're still with us in the main room, go ahead and click the join button, please, and arrive in your breakout room to have this conversation with your colleagues.
I hope everybody got into a room.
I see just a couple of people here. So Karen, if you can hear us, H. Walker, and let's see. So just Karen and H. Walker are the only two that I see in the main room. If there's anything we can do to help you get to your breakout room, please let us know. You can unmute your mic or put it in chat and we'll help you the best we can.
They
So
both
Karen,
are assigned to breakout room 3.
okay.
Sure.
So they may have stepped away, and we can just check in with them in a few minutes just to make sure if they've rejoined us, they can get where they're going. And Karen, I have 2 of your slides. I have the 3 pillars for ingredients necessary to diminish trauma effects and what people need most. I have them after this. So I don't know if you want to
Nice.
share those.
Oh.
Okay.
I don't even, were they did I send those? No. Or they're old. Okay. Which ones are they? Whatever.
It's perceived safety, powering.
Oh yeah, my usual.
Yeah.
Triangle.
Yes. And the hope, what people need most, hope.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you. Yeah. Tanya, that was amazing. That was so great.
Did you like it?
God, I loved it.
Good.
You did not need me. And believe me, I'm a participant here.
No.
No, I'm telling you, that was so good. And that research is interesting.
There's tons of it right now. There's tons of stuff coming out.
I need to find it. I want to write.
So Harvard Business, it's the big companies. It's like IBM. It's
yeah, Harvard Business Review does it. Okay.
Yeah,
and just Google it, because what I want to do is I want to add, my book is supposed to come out next year now. It keeps getting pushed back. So I want to have a chapter on COVID. I also want a chapter on families, all those family interviews I did, rather than do a separate book, like just broaden it. But I really want to do a chapter on COVID, like just what just happened, in terms of the people we support and what they went through and what they need.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, so they're inviting me to join the group 3. I'll say not now, right? Not now, not right now.
That was an accident, Karen.
Oh, okay.
The other Karen by accident.
Oh, good. I had a moment of guilt, like, oh, am I supposed to be in a group and I'm having so much fun?
It's true. And I keep saying it. And I don't know that I should be telling people what to feel when they're going back to work. Because, well, I know I'm not telling them, but it was like, I haven't gone back to work yet.
Well, you know, it's so funny. Like I'm supposed to start seeing people because I'm doing all this teletherapy. Well, I just got a text as we're sitting here, and the air conditioning in my office, but it's an old building, so it has single office like units.
Right.
My office was broken, so I was going to go to this other psychologist's office who was not going to be back for eons probably. And they just texted me the air conditioning in his office is broken. And I'm like, yes.
Darn.
Like, oh, well. So I'm not coming. So probably not even until the very end of next week. Like I have a couple of people I see that are really, really wanting in-person therapy.
Right.
And it's hard to do the EMDR. I really need to do that in person. We've tried to do it with the screen. It's just not as good. So, you know, I owe them. So, but I think I'm going to be able to work it out 1 or 2 days a week and not go back as much as I was.
Well, we're getting a few requests now for flying places. You know, I've been doing so much curriculum design and behind the scenes stuff with this kind of stuff. I don't know that for me, it may not change for a while. We'll see. So
yeah, I mean, that's a nice thing. Don't you want that? I mean, that's great. I am going, it looks like I'm going to be going like once a month somewhere in person at this point, like doing agency trainings. I don't mind an agency, but another weird conference like that last one, 250 people, no mask, everybody acting like it never happened.
No.
I was uncomfortable.
Well, you know, I'm still going out in my mask now, and all the mask mandates are lifted. So the stores don't have signs or anything. No one really, if I go to the grocery store, people seem to have on the mask. Anywhere else, you don't really see it. And I'm still wearing mine. And I was like, I'm just not ready. I'm not ready to take it off yet.
You know what? I'm wearing mine too.
And it's beautiful.
It's so funny. Like the organic places, everyone's got a mask on. The regular grocery stores, no one's got a mask on.
Or if you go even to the doctor, yesterday I had a mammogram and they were like, everybody's in masks, you know, all the patients are in masks, all the staff is in masks. So
yeah, it's like, yeah, a little more aware, right?
Yep.
So I had the saddest call at noon. Well, I had a call while I was presenting this morning. It's so funny because I was presenting the refresher for my trauma-informed training. And then the refresher is all the stuff that you hit. I showed the empathy video. I talked about the listening and truly listening, right? And being present and body language. I actually even had one of the same internet pictures that you had, right? That remember, I thought I put it in here. And it was like all the same stuff. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we are just such kindred spirits.
We share a brain.
I mean, it was incredible.
I wish I shared your brain, but
no, I would love yours. I'd be a better business person and more together and more creative. But it was so funny because I just showed the empathy video.
I always show that. It's like such a nice reminder. It's so well done.
It's the best. And it really simply lays it out.
Yep.
It simply lays it out.
Yep.
And that animation keeps your attention. Right?
It does. I love the little animal that sticks his head down. Want a sandwich?
Oh, I know. It's so great. Yeah, I got to look at more of her stuff. Oh, but she called me then. So I called her back. This person I've known for many years, a friend of many years, her husband died.
What?
So he's got a serious drinking problem, and there have been a lot of problems, and they were separated, but never divorced, and checking on him, and the daughters were always worried about him, and she found him Friday.
Oh, Karen.
Oh, so that poor little baby, that's why I just kept saying, oh my God, what can I do for you? How can I support you? What can I do?
How old is the baby?
She's a baby, but he had one grandson at 19 months and another one on the way, and just kept drinking. Couldn't stop.
That's really sad. I hate that she found him too. There's something even.
So I'm like, what are you doing tomorrow? Come over, come over tomorrow night. Just let me give you a glass of wine and listen to you, whatever we can do. Because it's like, how do you even get that out of your head, right? How do you
Exactly.
And it just, ugh. I felt so bad for her, and she did everything in her mind, everything in her heart to get him to stop.
Yeah, well, you can't, if someone doesn't want it for themselves, you cannot,
Yeah,
you know.
can't. And then, can't feel guilty either.
But you do. I mean, that's kind of part of it, isn't it? I mean, not that I think she's codependent, but there's always that, what else could I have done? What else
No,
could I
she
have said?
asked him like, but she never, and they stay connected, and she was still checking on him and trying to get him to get a vaccine and doing all kinds of things for him still up until the end.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That sounds so sad.
I know. Ugh.
Well, let's see what we got in chat here.
Oh, goodness.
Hey, Vanessa, so you're having internet connection issues. Oh, okay. Hey, Charlisa, I'm not sure if you can hear me or if you have stepped away, but Vanessa got bumped out of her room. And Vanessa, do you know which room you are in, or do you mind which one you go back to? That wasn't a good question, but if you know which room you were in, we can put you back in the same one. And if not, we'll just drop you into one. You think it was one. Okay.
I just added you back to room 1, Vanessa. You should be able to join.
Thank you, Charlisa. There we go. And Karen, I don't know if you have rejoined us. Okay, she may have stepped away. And Karen, if you can't use your mic, you might also try the chat if you're having some issues there. We'll help you get where you need to be. We're doing 2 World Cafes tomorrow too. Are you coming to the SDA World Cafes, or you got full day?
I might be able to do the afternoon, although I have a 3 o'clock presentation and then I have a 9:30 meeting. If the 9:30 meeting is short, I'll come to the 10. Hopefully.
Yeah, I can only do the morning. I can't do the
I
afternoon.
can't do the afternoon. I've got a big thing. They just said there's 300 people.
Oh, wow. Hi, Judith. Did you get bumped out of your room?
Oh,
Yeah,
Vanessa said
I
she
did.
needs to get reassigned. Okay.
So it's over, right? I see just few participants.
It should be that everyone is in the breakout room until 2:48. So they have a few more, they have quite a little bit of time if you want to join them again.
Are you just joining the meeting, or were you?
No, I was in until when you were trying to do the breakout room, so I got kicked out.
Okay.
Already in a breakout room with anyone?
I can just wait. Then when they come back.
No, I'm going to add you to room 1.
Okay.
So you should see a blue button pop open, Judith. Thank you, Charlisa.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. And great comments while you're taking care of your 4-year-old.
I know, I'm impressed. If I was taking care of a 4-year-old, I'd probably be crying. They're so cute at that age. They're so much fun, and I'd be completely distracted.
Yeah, that's the thing.
No, my daughter has autism, so she's very, very busy and not cute sometimes.
Oh, yeah, what a challenge. At least you have a nice early diagnosis and you're on top of that. Good for you.
Yeah.
That's such a big part of it.
Yeah, she's a super sweet kid though. She's super, super sweet. But sometimes some of her actions, I get the instant that she can't control it. And it's just like, oh,
Yeah.
I know it's not you, but.
Charlisa, was she in school or services or anything prior?
She was going to school in Maryland called was it HC Wheatley? I think they specialize in like special needs children before they go to elementary school. So she has 1 more year there, and then she'll go to kindergarten.
Good. Okay.
And she didn't do too well with the virtual learning this year. It was really hard to try to get her to want to sit and focus unless it was like song time or something like that where she could dance and play. But
It
yeah.
does not work for some kids. My girlfriend's granddaughter she's in 4th grade this year. So it was last year when she was in 3rd grade was the bulk of the pandemic. And she just decided in the last 2 weeks of school, she wasn't going to do it anymore. Like she just basically dropped out of 3rd grade. She would turn it on and she would kind of get past what she needed to, but she just wasn't having it anymore. And her teacher was not a teacher that she had a good match with. This year she's done great, but last year I thought, oh man, she's going to end up failing 3rd grade simply because she just can't sit there anymore.
Poor thing. And it's so hard for kids.
Yeah, it is. My nephew did into when they opened it back up where some kids can come in part of the week and do partially virtual. My niece and nephew did that because it was just easier for them to learn that way.
Yeah.
Some kids can do okay at home, but some it is a really big struggle.
Oh yeah. Horrible. I think the majority of kids really struggle.
Yeah, they need other kids. I need other kids at this point.
It's really true. They need that interaction. And they also, how do you, we have problems with our attention. How do you keep a kid's attention?
Absolutely.
It's so tough. The best teacher, it's just so tough. And then these teachers have half their kids there and the other half on a computer and they're talking back and forth. How do you teach like that? I've heard a lot of teachers say it's just like almost impossible, like they struggle so much.
I can't imagine, because that's not how they learned to teach at all either. It's like everybody had to adapt, right?
Yeah, big time. Big time.
Yeah, I think all parents should be a lot more respectful to teachers when the students go back to school. They should take Teacher Appreciation Week a lot more serious now.
Those teachers will be getting massage coupons and here's a trip to
wine bottles. Here's a case of wine.
So Tanya, we'll see like if everybody's sharing, we don't have to stop for my slides. We can just let them share because they may share this whole time. It may be, because I'm sure the dialogues are great.
Okay.
What time did you say you wanted me to close the room?
They should come back at 2:48.
Okay.
And that'll give us just enough time, I think, for a quick summary. And if they don't have a lot to say, then Karen has 2 slides. And if not, we'll just kind of close out from there. So we are really interested in what you talked about, especially just in terms of kind of major themes. You maybe don't want to talk about what you talked about. Maybe you heard something from someone else that just made you think, or gave you some hope, or maybe gave you an idea about something you could try. So there's a couple ways you could summarize, but we really want to hear from you. You can unmute your mic if you just want to share aloud, and sometimes that's the easiest way, but you can also use the chat box, as you all have been doing a wonderful job with that through our time together. So if you will, just either unmute your mic or put some things in chat just about your impressions about the conversation that you had with one another. You don't have to go deep or personal in any way, but I'm kind of interested in the broad sweeps, just a summary of what you talked about together.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello there, Bernitrice.
Bernitrice, thank you.
Bernitrice.
It's okay, I know. Our group pretty much had a collaborative experience as to, what have we done and what worked and didn't work for us during the pandemic. And moving forward and entering the workforce, I'm sorry. So a lot of things that was shared was people were really connected spiritually with their spiritual faith, or people in their churches with their family members and with friends. Also engaging in hobbies that were very peaceful and relaxing to them, such as gardening, and how that translated into some kind of spiritual healing or relaxation. And sometimes it even became a message to them when they were doing things with nature. Also appreciating and being grateful, like you shared earlier, with some of the things that we tend to take for granted, that the pandemic has taught us. And as far as supporting, how we support the people that we support, there was one great example that a person shared, was that they were out in the community one day and they decided to buy cards for a home of people that they support, and they know that everyone in that home enjoys coffee. So they provided gift cards, and the people that we support were so appreciative of that person for thinking of them in that way. And then also one thing that the person shared was that it really doesn't take much to make the people that we support happy. It's the really smallest things, ideas that we could do that will make someone's day really great. And also, as far as DDS staff is concerned, for the support that we provide to them, is also we have a job to do, just to not to approach everyone with a business-oriented mind, but really take time to, really ask them how they're doing, how you can support them, or sometimes just be an ear to listen, because, life was happening outside of work. Life was happening inside the pandemic and outside of that pandemic. So that's what we had to share.
Bernitrice, that was awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. That is incredibly insightful on a number of levels. And even, one of the things you said about doesn't take much to make the people we support happy. It doesn't take much to make one another happy. I know certainly during the pandemic, a lot of my friends have reached out with just really small gestures that, took a little time and a little bit of thought, but really were not expensive and were not grand. They were just little, I'm thinking of yous, that made all the difference to me. And I think that's true for us as well. Andy's saying in chat that he thought having an opportunity to talk through how people are feeling about this transition was really helpful, and figuring out some ways to offer people more opportunities to do this would be good. And I wonder if other people are thinking that. Maybe just give us a thumbs up, emoticon, or raise your hand or something if you feel like that's something you'd enjoy having an opportunity to do, or to create that space for one another. Crystal says, I agree. I'm happy that Tanya and Karen facilitated the World Cafe instead of a webinar training. I think one major learning for me, and I bet Karen would agree, I think we've had this conversation, and if not, I'll just ask you to weigh in, Karen. But the reason we happened upon the World Cafe model for having some of these conversations during the pandemic is because we're coming from a place of not knowing. So in so many ways, we are learning how to navigate this, and we're doing it in partnership with other people. It would be awfully hollow of me to just present a bunch of content to you and not give you the opportunity to tell me what your experiences are, because I don't know. I don't have the answers for this, and I would be suspicious of anyone who says they do. So I do think creating space for one another is a really important skill to develop, and understanding that none of us are the experts in this, but we collectively have a lot of wisdom about it. What do you think, Karen?
I remember when we had the first meeting, so everything had just shut down. We were about 3 weeks into it, and Michael and Tanya and Bob gathered a bunch of different people in different areas, all working in the disability world. And we had a meeting, a Zoom meeting. It was one of the first Zoom meetings. Maybe it was only like 2 weeks in. And people are saying, okay, we have to do something. We have to do something. All right, we'll do a webinar. We'll do a training. Remember? So we had different experts in different areas saying, well, we'll train, or we'll do this. And Tanya said, do you guys know what a World Cafe is? I think that's what we need to do instead. We need to listen to each other. We need to hear each other. We need to share what we're going through. And I remember at the time, I'm getting chills now. At the time I got chills, and I'm getting them again, ooh, wow, this sounds so important. This is the way to approach things, not like there's an expert that's gonna tell us all what to do, but we're all bringing our little piece of reality together, and we're connecting which parts connect. and we're respecting which parts are different, and we're learning from each other. And yeah, that makes total sense. That's what we need to do. And, you know, that was the opportunity we had today too. And I was so grateful when Tanya said, this is what we need to do. And we've been doing it ever since. And it's profound, right? Because no one's the expert. We don't know what we're going through.
No, no, but at least we have each other, right? And was it never does an empathic statement start with at least, but at least we have each other. So,
it's true. And we know, maybe we know some concepts, but everybody does. And then everybody has their own little piece of the puzzle. So it sounds like you all shared a lot of cool pieces. And I would love to hear from the other group.
Yep, absolutely. And I do see in chat, Michael says it's incredibly helpful to just kind of drop my emotions on the people in my group, talking about a number of things, how we cope, what's hurting us, what we felt about the vaccine, and how some people deal with it compared to other people's responses. Oh my gosh, yes. And that conversation, those conversations will continue. They happen in my home. They happen with my neighbors. They're happening at the grocery store. I had for the first time someone confront me about wearing a mask because I'm still wearing mine. I'm not ready to give it up. And it was a nice confrontation. It was just sort of an offhand comment like, oh, you know, you don't have to wear that anymore. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not ready. I'm not ready to breathe everybody's air yet. Yeah, so great stuff there. Anybody else want to share? Unmute your mic. Tell us what you're thinking, what your experience was.
We also talked about empathy. Someone mentioned, and I was thinking about that with myself as well, how now they're more generous in giving at this time. And so I thought about that and I said, yeah, I believe that this, I mean, we can think about the fatigue and the stress of it all, but in what ways have we evolved or become better people? So
yeah, Karen always reminds us of the gifts of COVID. And it is one of the things I appreciate more than anything else because great gifts came out of this. And one of those is the ability to be empathic with one another, to be more gracious, to be more understanding, to be more kind. You know, those are lots of gifts that they slowed us down. We had to be slowed down, right, in order to experience that. So
true. So true. I needed that. I needed to slow down for a minute. Didn't quite expect it like that.
That was more like hitting a wall. But so our friends, we have made it to the end of a couple of hours together. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you just pausing and talking with one another and with us today. Karen and I have provided our contact information. If you have questions or thoughts, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're both awesome about getting back in touch with people. And we'd love to talk with you more about your experiences. But I hope you all will continue the conversation. You see, it doesn't have to be remarkably structured. You can just really have a good conversation with one another based on some of these principles. Exactly. Karen, you want to say bye to folks?
Just bye and thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for having us, Crystal and Charlisa for coordinating. Michael, thank you so much. Thank you all of you for a wonderful shared experience.
I agree. It's a great afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good one, ladies.
Thank you.